Hey, everybody. Have you ever taught a kid something and they remembered it right now? Later on, they forgot it. Then another time they'll remember, and another time they forget. It's so confusing. But why are kids forgetting? Why can't they, once they know it, why can't they remember it always? Welcome to Thursday Thought Junction, where we investigate the behind the scenes aspects of math and writing skills. Hi, I'm Cheri Dotterer, your brain boss and your impact learning coach. Today, I'm going to share 7 possible reasons why kids know the answer in one moment and not the other. Let's get started on our 6 reasons why. So here's my first example. Letter B, D, P, and Q. The kids are with writing struggles, get them wrong all the time. They struggle, they sit, they stare at the paper. But then another time they write it out almost like automatic. What is going on? Well, my first thought to you today is that their working memory at that very moment is limited. Our brains can only hold about 4 to 7 pieces of information at one time. Hence, that's the reason like phone numbers had 4 digits at first, then they moved up to 7 digits, and now today we have 10 digits, but they're grouped in groups of 3 and 4. Even though they have 4 at first, then added 7, and now added 3 more, they're still in groupings of 3 digits. So when you rattle off your phone number, you'll rattle off the area code, blah, 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 and then you'll do those first 3 digits, those numbers, blah, 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 and then you'll do the last 4, blah, 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 blah. And it becomes automatic. Your brain doesn't have to think about it. It's because our brain learns in chunks. Our brain learns chunks of information. So when we have the word band or bread, for instance, when we're breaking that down and we make it so that we have to think about each letter, B, A, N, D, or B, R, E, A, D, bread. We have to stop and our brains get out of that automatic sequence, and other vessels and other parts of our brains kick in to help us slow down and think. It's not automatic. Which brings me to our second point. We talk about forgetting, but forgetting is necessary. There's a thing called the Ebbinghaus effect. It's where we'll forget about 70% of what we learned that day, and we're like, we remember only like 8% in the first 24 hours. That's why spaced repetition, interleaving, varied practice are so essential to our students. We need to keep coming back to it. In 2021, Scott Small, he's a neurologist. He wrote this book called Forgetting: The Benefits of Not Remembering. And I have a couple quotes from the book. We need to forget because we need our forgetting to balance our memories. Very interesting thought, isn't it? We need to forget because we need our forgetting to balance our memories. Quote number 2, forgetting is more important than remembering. What? Forgetting is more important than remembering. Because when we remember, we actually embed better neurological connections in our sulci and our gyrus. And so those of you who are I just said 2 techie words and you're going, what? Those are what make the brain look like it has curves and shapes, and it like kind of goes down inside. That's what those are. Those are the points of the brain that help give it more surface area, so to speak. So one technique that helps you with remembering is journaling. I know our kids are struggling to write. You don't want to add journaling to it, but believe me, you don't have to journal with a pencil and paper. You can journal with a text-to-speech app on your phone. The iPhone even has an app on it that's called Journal. Okay, point number 3, cognitive overload. You ever feel like there's just too much information going on in your head and you just can't keep it all straight? Do you think that doesn't happen to our kids too? One of the things about lesson planning is if we invert the way we teach, where we teach indirectly first and then directly, it kind of primes our kids' brains for learning, and the cognitive overload calms down. So what do I mean about this? So I had a kid this morning, and it was the first time we met. So she didn't know me too well. Mom was there, but I wanted to get information from her. Asking her a little bit about herself. Asked her something basic, like, how old are you? What grade are you in? Getting to know her that way and just trying to get her to interact with me a little bit. And then I asked her this question. I said, what do you think about when you think about 100 lockers? She looks at me. She looks at her mom. She looks at me again and went like, what are you talking about? I said, think about it. When you think about 100 lockers, what do you think about? And we finally got to the discussion of the hallway at her middle school where we have 100 lockers going down each side. And what are some of the things about the lockers that she remembers? Where's hers? Where's her friends? Things like that about lockers before I even started talking about what I wanted to talk about that day. Kind of got her in that thought process and kind of got her anxiety down a little bit, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. Got her anxiety down a little bit so that she could then engage in the cognitive demand that was required to do the mathematics that we were working on that day. Point number 4 is shallow versus deep learning. If students only memorize facts, the information stays in their short-term memory. But if we move it to long-term memory, we have to add things like hands-on activities, storytelling, making emotional connections. I needed to make an emotional connection with that student about lockers before I could even engage her in the locker scenario. So this is the locker scenario, in case you're wondering. We have 100 students and 100 lockers. Tell me about that. She looked at me. She was still not quite getting it. All I wanted to do was have a conversation with her. So all we were trying to do is initially have that conversation about lockers and 100 students and 100 lockers. I asked her, so what could the teacher do with 100 students and 100 lockers? Give everybody a locker? She kind of like looks at me with that kind of voice and like, yeah, exactly. Every student gets a locker. How about if you are student 1 right now? What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to open up all the lockers. But I can't do that. They have come. Let's just take off the combinations, the locks right now. Okay, so you're going to go through and you're going to open all the lockers. Now you become student number 2. Now I want you to open every other locker. And she's looking and she's thinking and she's trying to do this from memory. And I said, okay, tell you what, I gave your mom a worksheet. Can you get that out? Now, I want you to put something on the worksheet that has the same side up. And they happen to have pennies. So they put all the heads up and the tails down. I said, okay, now you're student number 1. And you're going to open all the lockers. Let's say the pennies are the lockers. What are you going to do? You're going to flip it over. So we flipped it over. So that brings me to point number 5, where I reduced her anxiety by trying to make a connection emotionally giving her a hands-on activity that was going to deepen her learning. And we had a kind of a story going on there because we were talking about the 100 lockers at her school. So I reduced her anxiety by flipping and creating an indirect approach to math by not solving anything with her today. I made it multisensory, which is my next point. I lost track of my numbers. Point number 6. Multisensory learning. We had pennies. We had a worksheet. We had discussion. She had other things that were available that she was able to use. We also had her create her own questions and then write down those questions. So I also engaged her in a writing activity, and by relating that to what I was already doing in the math tutoring, I engaged writing as well. And I said to Mom, we can adjust that in a little bit, but we were able to take her through this process of reducing her cognitive overload with different techniques and different strategies, and not solving and getting the answer right away. The 7th point I want to make is kind of a shift, and that is sleep. So I always use this analogy when I'm talking about sleep. Our brain is created like a filing cabinet. Our filing cabinet has different folders for every memory. On the outside of that folder, there is a sticky note. On the sticky note, it relates our emotion and our feeling towards whatever's inside the folder. And during our waking hours, we're going to fill up the short-term memory, and that's in our hippocampus, which is in the center of the brain. I know it's an anatomy part. Don't worry about that, but it's in the center of the brain, and we're going to fill up the hippocampus with all our daily memories. At nighttime, when we're sleeping, when we're in that deep sleep mode, the brain is taking all the stuff from our hippocampus and it's putting it and moving it over into our long-term memory in our temporal lobe. So it's moving from one to the other, back and forth, moving all of it. So it's like almost like one folder filing cabinet gets moved at every moment throughout the night. If kids don't have enough of that deep sleep, if you don't have enough of that deep sleep, if I don't have enough of that deep sleep, guess what the next day is? It's miserable. But what's going on inside of our brain is our hippocampus never got emptied. And it's almost like the hippocampus, the filing cabinet part of it only will work from the point in which it's already been filled. And so if you only have empty your hippocampus throughout the night, and you only got a half a hippocampus to work with, you're only going to be able to tolerate a half a day's work. So, and I know it's an analogy. It's not exactly how it's going on neuroscience-wise, but it's a way to make it so that you can understand how you're emptying the filing cabinet, moving it over into the long-term memory, and then stacking those memories up in order. And they kind of rearrange the orders because they rearrange them based on feelings. And if we've got feelings that are, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do that again, they're going one place. If we've got feelings that are, that was meh, but I think I can handle that again, they go in another place. Then we got this, what seems like this huge filing cabinet of, I am never going to touch that again. And that is all run by our amygdala. So our amygdala, fear, fight, flight, or fright response gets in there and interferes with all those memories. We need to change those memories in our system to be more palatable over time. There are some memories that I would never want to remember again. There are also some traumas that I would never want to remember again, but those affect how our memory works and will also affect our sleep. So let's recap. How our kids remember some things one time and don't remember the other. They could have a working memory overload at the moment where their working memory is limited. It could be to many things throughout the day. I gave you the example of B and the D. Forgetting is necessary. The Ebbinghaus effect. Cognitive overload. Shallow and deep learning. I gave you some examples of that. Stress and anxiety block. Multisensory learning, and sleep consolidation. So now that we understand why students forget, what are some ways that we can make learning stick? How do we engage their brains to strengthen memory and recall? How about this one? Have you ever had an example of the kid suddenly remembering something that happened weeks ago that you're going, what? So this example, Jonalee talks about this one all the time. When she brings up one of her tasks for like the second time after they haven't seen it for several weeks. Oh, you were wearing those pink shoes that I just love. I love it when you wear them. Or another kid's going, you were wearing this or this. And it talks a lot. They make the association to that visual, what they saw. But there's more coming next week. So next week, we're going to be talking about how do we engage our students' brains to help memory and recall. Thanks for being here on Thursday Thought Junction. You can see me every week at 4 o'clock. This has been Cheri Dotterer, your Brain Boss Impact Learning Coach. See you next week.